Is America exporting white supremacy? Can America be accused of being a terrorist nation? Yeah, you can laugh about it, I can laugh about it, but you got our country accusing Iran of being a terrorist nation, Syria being accused of being a terrorist nation, a lot of countries around the world being accused of being terrorist nations. And in my mind, we are absolutely correct in making those accusations. But now you have a gentleman that basically terrorized or assassinated, actually, Jo Cox, who was an elected official in the UK. And in my mind, that was an act of terrorism, even though it just involved one person. I'm going to play for you a clip from MSNBC regarding the assassination of Jo Cox.
Well, we worked very closely together on Syria and the airdrops, and she was just a lovely person, so I just wanted to come down and show my respect.
My thoughts and prayers are with Jo's husband and her children. She was a proud and passionate campaigner who will be desperately missed.
We are there not to serve our own interests, but to serve the interests of the people who sent us to Parliament, and Jo felt that very keenly.
Friends of British lawmaker Jo Cox remembering the Labour MP who was killed yesterday. Cox was stabbed and shot in the street as she arrived in her district to meet with constituents. Police have not identified the suspect, but NBC's UK partner ITV News says he is Thomas Mair. Mair's half-brother told the network the family was shocked at his arrest. In a show of unity, British Prime Minister David Cameron spoke today alongside opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn in the neighborhood where Cox was killed. Richard Cohen is the president and CEO of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has uncovered the connection between the suspect in this case and a neo-Nazi group in the U.S. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I want to start right there with the suspect and these potential ties to a neo-Nazi group. What can you tell us about that? What does that tell us about this very vicious act?
Well, the suspect, Mair, had subscriptions to neo-Nazi literature from the National Alliance. He bought handbooks relating to making explosives. He bought a handbook that had to do with, making an improvised homemade gun. And it could have been the gun that he used for shooting Ms. Cox. I think it tells us a few things. First, it tells you something about the motives of the shooter. Yeah. Secondly, it reflects the fact that the white nationalist movement in this country has an international dimension. People in England frequently come to this country, to attend white nationalist events, and people in this country go there and to other European places. It's just this kind of rise in ethnic nationalism that we see throughout Western Europe and in the United States.
Right, Richard, let me follow up with you on that point. How prevalent is it? Because I think a lot of people would be surprised to know the international reach of white nationalism.
Well, I think it's very, very prevalent. Neo-Nazi parties have gained seats in certain European parliaments. Today is the anniversary of the Charleston shooter, the Charleston massacre, and as your viewers probably remember, the killer had symbols of the apartheid regime in South Africa, the regime in Rhodesia, again reflecting the international reach of the white supremacist movement. I'd say also that we see this kind of explosion of ethnic nationalism in this country too, in reaction to our changing demographics and the news about the Syrian refugees. Quite frankly, I think some of that anger and white racial resentment is what's buoying Mr. Trump's campaign.
Well, and I just want to play you something, speaking of the actual politics of this, from Jo Cox herself. This was her maiden speech to Parliament. Take a listen, and then I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Okay.
Our communities have been deeply enhanced by immigration, be it Irish Catholics across the constituency or Muslims from Indian Gujarat or Pakistan, principally from Kashmir. And whilst we celebrate our diversity, the thing that surprises me time and time again as I travel around the constituency is that we are far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us.
Stark rhetoric from a lot of the rhetoric we're hearing right now. What does this say about this moment?
Well, I mean, her eloquence is quite something, but it would have been anathema to the white supremacist in her country, the white supremacist in this country. And quite frankly, it's very different than some of the rhetoric that we're hearing from the presumptive Republican nominee.
All right, Richard Cox, thank you so much for your...
All right, so I will submit that it's not necessarily the number of people that are killed, maimed, that makes an act of terror. I submit that it is the reason for the act itself that makes it an act of terror. Now, various communities within this country have been terrorized by various white supremacist groups. But for some reason, this country does not go after those groups, period. Now you have the same situation overseas, and as this gentleman indicated, this murderer basically subscribed to American white supremacist groups. So again, I will submit that this obviously is a major problem, and my question is this: is America exporting its white supremacist ideas, and if so, can it be called a terrorist nation? A lot of you are going to jump up and down and go crazy about this, but there is more here to indicate that this was an act of terror that was prompted by racist or ideology as far as the murder of this woman than you had with the Orlando shooter who killed 50 people, 49, 50 people. All they found thus far is that he looked on websites, but they can find no direct communication, no entry into chat rooms, nothing else other than him making the statement that he supports ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. Now, the support of those three groups in itself is an enigma, because Hezbollah and ISIS are enemies, deadly enemies. As a matter of fact, they fight against each other. So for him to say that he supports both in itself doesn't make any sense. But, we need to keep going. More information is surfacing. First they were talking about the wife was involved, and now that story basically is changed. There was talk about prosecuting her, and as time goes on and they get the actual information regarding her involvement, that claim is carrying less and less weight. So, is America exporting white supremacy? Is America a terrorist nation? It's up to each of us to decide.